The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they had been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Howie Evans, sports editor of the famous New York Amsterdam News. How are you doing today, Howie?
Good morning, Roscoe, and I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Well, you write about black athletes, and there's a lot to write about, and recently much of the major media has been demonizing some of our black athletes because of things that they allege to have been done. The question is, to what extent are black athletes held to a higher standard than white athletes, and to what extent is this due to the media bias?
Well, I'm not sure they're held to a higher standard. I'm almost positive that there is a tremendous degree of racism in terms of how they deal with a black sports celebrity in lieu of other celebrities.
Now, how is that reflected?
Well, it's reflected in this way. You take all of the Hollywood celebrities. You take the local people here in the city of New York and the state of New York, who may not be Hollywood celebrities, but who are very famous people. For instance, when Madoff was involved in that big financial scandal and all, which he's serving time now, you never ever saw him go into any of these hearings with his hands cuffed. Never. When Plaxico Burress turned himself in, the police didn't have to go looking for him. He walked into the station, and when he walked out, they had him cuffed, and there were two burly policemen walking next to him, as if he was going to try and escape. But they were looking more for a photo opportunity for themselves. The other part of that is the very first thing that the mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, said is that we're going to prosecute him to the highest. The former Attorney General, what's his name? Morgenthau. He said 2 months before he left his office is that if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to see that he ends up in jail for many years. Now, here's a guy who had a permit for the gun that he was carrying, and it was wrong. We're not defending that. The gun had a permit, but he didn't have a permit for the state of New York. Shot himself, and all. So now here's Plaxico Burress, who got something like 2.5 years, 3 years in jail. He's been trying to get out of jail on good behavior and so forth. When the last holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas rolled around, he asked if he could get released for a day to spend time with his family. They wouldn't let him. In the meantime, some of the so-called illegitimate people who are involved in crimes, who are also imprisoned, were released almost the identical time that he requested. Now, these were guys who had committed murders and all. So he to me is the most glaring case of a black sports celebrity who has literally done nothing, who is serving 3 years in time.
Well, is this a message of trying to keep them in their place? Is that what that's about?
It may well be. The media in this city feeds off sports and the lives that they pursue off the field of play. And if a black athlete stumbles, he's going to feel the entire wrath of the media in this city.
But the same thing could be true of a white athlete. It so happens that the sports are dominated here in the city and nationally by black athletes, But do you think the media would treat a white athlete in the same way?
No, absolutely not.
Well, I think they were pretty hard on Lance Armstrong.
Well, yeah,
They were pretty hard on Roger Clemens.
But he has first. They embraced Roger Clemens from almost near the beginning until they started writing a series of stories, and then when he went to Congress and they knew that he had lied, and all. But up to then, he had kind of been treated with kid gloves. Lance Armstrong is really not a native of New York, and he is still out peddling around the world, although he's been involved probably more so in drug activity, supposedly and allegedly, than Roger Clemens.
Well, there is a different standard, clearly, a different standard for African Americans than most things. But let's look at African American college athletes. At one time when you and I were coaching and involved in college, it wasn't a question of was an athlete going to be graduating. It was a question, when would he graduate? Would he graduate in June or at the end of the summer? Now, the new regulations, a athlete can go in college for a year and do well and get $1 million contract and not even think about school. To what extent are the colleges complicit in this as well as the professionals?
I don't think the colleges really care one way or the other, as long as they can continue to get their massive amounts of money derived from sponsorships of their local teams, monies that come in from the NCAA and all. But in the other part of your question, 95% of the black athletes in this country who go to college graduate. That's the first thing. If we figure in just the athletes who go to the Big Ten, the ACC, or those guys who make All-American, it's a very minute percentage. If you take all of the black athletes who go to Ivy League schools, they all graduate.
And the ones who go to black colleges.
And the ones who go to black college, they all graduate. So this figure is blown up into the few black athletes who jump from college to go to the NBA. That's a very small percentage of black athletes who attend colleges, and it's unfair for people to keep stating that these black kids are not graduating, because I hear so many black educators say the same thing. But they're focusing on the high-profile, maybe 2 black athletes from a school who achieved the status of being able to leave school ahead of time.
Well, there are some colleges like Penn State and Notre Dame that have a very high graduation rate, and that's because they put an emphasis on athletics, on academics. But there are some colleges, even when the athletes stay in school for 4 years, they do not graduate. And that's because they do not give them the support, because many of them go into college with low academic performance initially. So what can we do to get colleges to support athletes more with academic programs?
Well, the most important thing is this. Take a program like, say Memphis. They had 4 kids who were all underclassmen that were recruited by Calipari, knowing that they were going to leave. They left. All 4 of them left with 3 and 4 years left of college eligibility, and all. So this is like for Calipari. If he can get the cream of the crop recruits every year, and maintain his 25 and 30 wins every year, then no one is complaining about that. No one is going to say, well, these guys are not graduating. They don't care.
Because in many ways, sports like some parts of basketball and football are really minor leagues for the professional leagues. And somebody like Calipari, he's a coach of a minor league professional team. And because it's associated with a college, he gets a good salary. That doesn't seem to be consistent with the idea of sports helping the people to grow up and become full-fledged citizens. And it doesn't seem to be consistent with the academic mission of a college. When you have a pro team, you know you're going to bring in people for a year and then leave. That seems to be a distortion of the purpose of academics and athletics. There are some, particularly Division three schools and many black schools that have a good balance between that. What can we do to get more of that balance?
I don't think you can get more of that balance unless you start paying these guys.
Unless you pay the athletes?
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
why not give them, first of all, there's a tremendous imbalance between athletic scholarships and educational scholarships. We're talking about, for instance, in basketball, 15 kids who get scholarships. There's this tremendous outcry among educators across the country who are involved who are at these big windmill colleges and all. They're hypocrites, because when you look at the literally thousands of kids who are at a Penn State or at a data school where they have an enrollment of 60,000 kids and all, and you might have 20,000 kids on scholarships who have nothing at all to do with athletics at all, but yet the focus is on these 15 kids who they all say is getting a free ride. Well, that's not, that, to me, well, it's very hypocritical.
Your solution is to pay the athletes, all of them, or just the top ones, or how would you do that?
No, I think that to encourage these kids to stay in school, and I just think that's a stopgap solution anyway, because I don't think that's going to happen. Because we only have this problem in basketball and football to a small degree. Football is not like basketball, where they're dealing with over 100 kids. So you don't have 100 kids leaving a major college football program to go to the NFL. That's not happening.
Because the NFL has the rules, they don't take them.
Yeah, but the rules are so hypocritical, Dr. Brown. Hypocritical in this way. They say that an athlete, a college athlete who is at the University of Kentucky, has to be in college for 1 year according to NBA rules. Mm-hmm. Now, take this 1 year now. Now, you have been part of collegiate athletics all your life. Mm. You know that a kid signs up and he's in class. The first semester, he don't go to class, right? Ain't nothing happening except he's going to be put on probation for the second semester. Mm-hmm. These kids don't go to class. They don't go to class because they know that nothing is going to happen to them, because they know that they're going to spend 1 year representing this university without any repercussions, because none of them are going to class.
Don't the colleges have some responsibility for that?
Of course they do. They could stop that. They could stop that right away by telling the coaches, you can't recruit these kids. Mm-hmm.
Or if they do recruit them, make sure that somebody even babysits them, walks them to class.
Yeah, make sure they go to class for that 1 year. Mm-hmm. And if they miss class, if you miss a class, you miss a game. Mm-hmm. Simple solution to me. You know, you miss a class, you miss a game.
Yeah, what will happen, as you know, everything is evolutionary. College athletes started as a diversion for the students, and then eventually the alumni got involved in it, and eventually became a minor league for professional teams. At some point in time, I believe they'll just have a minor league composed of colleges, and they will pay the players, and they probably won't even have to go to class. It's almost at that point now, and I think the society is not ready to face the hypocrisy of saying that they are real students representing them.
But you remember now, years and years ago, Doc, years and years ago, you had football players staying in school for 5, 6, 7 years, right?
That's
you
right.
Remember that?
But they did get a degree.
They did get a degree, and they were paid.
Yeah.
And they got paid.
Yeah. Under the table.
Under the table. Yeah, they got paid. So we're not talking about anything that's really new here. You know, we're talking about something that is just on a more higher scale.
Yeah, one of the things we try to do on this program is to get people to thinking about these issues. And now another issue that we're concerned about with African Americans in sports is ownership, head coaching, top jobs on the staff. You look at the sidelines of some of these sports teams, all the assistants, or most of them, are black, and the head coach is white, the athletic director is white. Not that white people don't have the ability to do this, but there are at least as many African Americans to do this. And if you have 85% of your players African American and 50% of your coaches, assistants African American, it seems to me that at least 40% of your head coaches ought to be African Americans. And similarly, in the business sector, you ought to be able to invite in people who have money to become supporters or owners of the team. How do you think we can address that?
Well, I call that the sports slave mentality, because at 95% of these colleges, and I'm talking about the major colleges, because this doesn't happen at Division III and to a degree at Division II. We're only talking about really the major colleges where they have 95,000 people at these football games. And
Michigan had 113,000 people.
And it's sold out for 10 years.
And that's
you can't
amazing.
get a ticket.
Because I like to ask you, why do people do that? Why do they spend money to come to a game on Saturday? What do you think?
Because most of the people who do it are people on the lower wage scale of life. And these small cities around the country become tremendous cities on football Saturday.
That's true.
You know, so this is their way of life. Instead of going out to the bars or going here, they spend their monies on these schools to go to the football games. 95% of them are not college graduates and drink beer. You know, 95% of them have never ever been to college.
That's very interesting.
At all.
But Michigan prides itself when they say 30,000 or 40,000 alumni come to those games. They probably do.
They probably do, you know. But the stadium seats over 125,000 or something.
Yeah, it's a big
stadium. So you still have a tremendous disparity in the number of people who may have graduated or went to college, and opposed to those who never went to college.
All right, going back to the question about getting more blacks into head coaching and ownership and athletic director positions, how do you think we could approach that?
Well, I look at the various pro sports leagues, and I'm almost sure that they kind of feed off of what happens with the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NBA. They kind of feed off of that. In college, it's become very important at the major schools, because now all of the top talent, for a large part, are all African-American players. So it makes sense to them and their thinking that when they go out recruiting, that these black assistant coaches can relate better to the athletes that they're recruiting. And very often they find out quite the opposite, that's not really true. Because if a guy can't recruit, it doesn't matter what color he is. If he can't recruit, if he can't get his message across, if he can't deliver these kids to these schools, he's not going to keep his job. I don't care how great this assistant is. If that guy goes out and they have pinpointed the top 100 recruits in the country, and he better come in with 3 or 4 of those guys, you know, on a regular and consistent yearly basis. He better come in with 3 or 4 of those guys.
But how does that translate in helping them to become head coaches and athletic directors?
It doesn't, because the majority of them never even reach that level. It's only an isolated few who ever reach that level.
But it seems to me, on just the basis of random numbers, the large numbers of African-American assistant coaches, there'd be a larger number who get into being head coaches. There seems to be a certain amount of nepotism where you pass this on, Bobby Bowden passes on to his son, and so on. How do you break that?
Well, I break it down into the social atmosphere of our country, and that most owners feel more comfortable when they are out amongst their friends, and many of them who, by the way, are not sports people. They're industrial people. They're involved in businesses and so forth. So they feel more comfortable relating to a white head coach than a black head coach. And when you go to these major schools, 90% of your application and trying to get these jobs depends on, first, how you relate to the search committee. who, by the way, most of them are 99% white. So first you got to relate to them. You got to make them understand that you want to maybe act like a white guy. You know. So now,
what does act like a white guy mean?
Well, adopt their ways, go to their social gatherings, and so forth, and all. Then you have you have this committee says, well, do you think that he would be a comfortable fit? That's the key, two key words: a comfortable fit. Now, a comfortable fit takes it completely away from the sidelines. I don't care how good this guy is, if they don't feel that he's a comfortable fit, he's not getting that job.
Now, does the comfortable fit translate into being a good coach?
No.
Why?
Because the coach very often is so under the gun, he's so concerned about how he's relating off the field and how he will be perceived and relating to his athletes on the field makes it a very difficult task for most of these guys, because we don't have this kind of pressure on a white head coach. The pressure is entirely different. His pressure is trying to win football games and all. The black coach has to be concerned about how am I going to relate to these to the white folks who are spending the money, who are paying for these seats and who are helping to bring these athletes here. And don't forget that most of these alumni associations hire the coaches at all. So 95% of them are not going to hire a black coach.
But in many universities, they have large numbers of African-American alumni. If they got together and put some pressure, wouldn't that cause those colleges to say, look, we got to be more equitable in providing opportunities? The African-American alumni haven't been very outspoken on this yet.
Well, I don't think that it's like two different worlds. And you can see that developing when you're on a college campus, you know, and I spent many years on these campuses where you will see where the white athletes will hang out together and the black athletes will hang out together. I mean, when I was coaching up at Fordham, I you know, it was very visible to me because I pay attention to these things, where these kids going, who they're with. So, and you could see they were all great friends, and many of them remain lifelong friends, but there becomes a barrier, and the barrier is socializing. Now, are you going to take these guys into your homes? Are you going to take them out to the country clubs? And for the most part, the answer is no. So there becomes a tremendous division on that level, and then it kind of ekes out when you leave school and then you go into the professional world. You know, it's always
into the coaching world as well.
And the coaching world, yeah. So you have this division of people and how they're going to live, where they're going to live.
But I think the media has some responsibility to continue to point out this disparity with large numbers of African-American athletes and assistant coaches and very few head coaches. And there are some writers in the media who've taken this on, you among them. So I think it's important to continue to bring that issue to the public and help them to understand it, because clearly African-Americans have the same ability to do anything that anybody else does if given the opportunity. Without question.
I mean, that's been proven over and over again. And the key word is, like you just said, given the opportunity. And without an opportunity, there can't be success. So when I see, take the New York Mets situation with Jerry Manuel. All season long, he's had to deal with these rumors about Bobby Valentine, the great Bobby Valentine. Well, what has he ever won?
Yeah. And a lot of people in the media brought that up. Yeah. As we come to the close of the program, I want to ask you something that you haven't thought about, but I want to make you think about it. Name the 5 greatest African-American athletes in American history.
Jim Brown.
Jim Brown, okay.
Rayford Johnson.
Rayford Johnson, okay, decathlete.
And he did, he there were other things that he did. The third one would be Althea Gibson.
I was just thinking that. Very good.
Not only was she, people don't realize that she was a hell of an athlete at Florida A&M.
And your next one?
The next one would be oh gosh, what was Bo Jackson.
Bo Jackson.
Who had he concentrated on baseball.
And the last one would be?
The last one, who would be the last one in that top five?
All right, we're coming to the end of the show. We'll let the audience decide what the last one will be. Today on African American Legend, we've been talking with Howie Evans, sports editor of the New York Amsterdam News. Thanks for being with us today, Howie.
Great, welcome.